Well, we are back live on the Revealed Radio Network. This is the Revealed Report. I am your host, John Wilson. I'm glad you joined us today. Well, due to today, we are kicking off a little bit earlier than what we normally would. We usually release our episodes at 6:30 p.m. Last night we went live at 6:30 p.m., but today we are giving you a live edition at 4 p.m. I'm sure some people will go out looking for it at 6:30. You'll be able to find it then as well. But today is a very special day, and I am celebrating one of the most important things in my life. And so today, I'm giving you the most important news in at least my world. It is my wife and I's 14th year anniversary. Believe it or not, she has put up with me for 14 years. So I want to tell my wife, happy anniversary. I love her dearly. That is, if she'll tune in and listen to this, because they say opposites attract. It must be true because my wife is not into all the politics and all of that. However, she was a Trump supporter and she did vote for President Donald Trump. So if anybody's going to hate me, I guess my wife and I go down like Romeo and Juliet. But it is a very special day. My wife is my soulmate and my best friend. And I'm so thankful that 14 years ago, she said, I do. My wife gave me this card today, which I thought was great. It identified us very, very well. Let me just take a moment. We'll get into the world news here in a moment. But it says, the story of us. Once upon a time, two people met, fell in love, and decided to spend forever together, but they didn't stop there. Soon they set out on a great journey, seeking their own happily ever after. Along the way, they faced a few dragons, explored new territory, and were thrust into adventures they never saw coming. They took every smile and every tear, a few difference of opinions, and some major triumphs, and they turned them into something beautiful. And it turns out they were living their happily ever after all along. Who says fairy tales don't come true? The end. My favorite love story of all time is the one we keep writing together day by day. This was a great, great card. And my wife is not like big on like giving me a bunch of cards and that. She would rather give me other stuff. But this was wonderful. This card actually describes us very, very well because we live in an age where a lot of people think that marriage and love is just the infatuation and feelings, and that does come, but there are moments that you have to get through things. So true love is when you love each other and not till death do you part, and you're there for one another in the good times and the bad times. And in my personal life, who has gone through about 14 years there, I went through a lot of medical trouble, and we've been married for 14 years. So most of our marriage, I went through some level of medical trouble. I had ulcerative colitis, and they tried to kill me once upon a time. And it was very, very dark times for me. And my wife was there, and she's seen me in my weakest, darkest moments, and she was my absolute best friend. So I want to tell you that marriage, I know that there's college professors. I know there's a culture and society that wants to make it look like marriage is not a great thing. But I want to tell you one of the greatest things you can do is get married. I was 24 years old. My wife was 19. We got married. At that time, we were so poor, so broke. I mean, we were just broke as can be. And I'm sure she probably wouldn't like me telling all these stories. But I remember our first apartment was a government-based, income-based apartment. And there was a neighbor that when he went off his medicine, he would just kind of throw stuff out his house. And I didn't have a whole lot of money, so he threw a guitar into the dumpster, and I'm a guitar player and I seen it. So I went dumpster diving. Of course, the only problem was it was at the absolute bottom of the dumpster. So my feet were hanging in the air, and I'm getting this guitar out. And my wife, when she caught me carrying the guitar back to the apartment, asked, where did you get that from? I said, I just got it from the dumpster. She said, you did not. I mean, we just moved in here a week and a half ago. People already know that we don't have a lot of money. Please don't embarrass me like that. I said, well, hold the guitar. The whammy bars fell to the bottom. I got to go back and get it. Needless to say, she won that battle. I didn't get the whammy bar, but I did get the guitar. And so we came a long, long way. We were just young and in love with one another. I knew her for about 3 months. I proposed to her, and about 2.5 months later, I got married. Somebody said that was pretty quick. I said, well, the end of the world may come soon. Jesus may come back tomorrow. Why wait too long? Somebody said, well, you don't even know her. I said, well, I got a lifetime to get to know her now. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. I'm glad I married the love of my life. And for those who have never purchased the book, The Final Flame, one of the great beauties of this story is if you notice this lead character woman in the story, She has dark hair, green eyes, and her name is Audrey. And you can't tell whether she's human or angel. Uh, she's named after my wife, and this book was dedicated to my wife. My first book I ever wrote was dedicated to my wife. So I'm very grateful for my wife today. And then we have 5 beautiful children, and 2 of them are very actively getting involved in the Revealed Radio Network. They want to kick off their own podcast coming this month. So be looking out for that. They're already building their episodes and scripts. And so one is called Get in the Game with Jesus with my oldest son, Levi, who wants to put a love for Jesus and America in the heart of every child, every young person. Also, the Biblical American Kids podcast with Camden, who also wants to put a love for America and the Bible in the heart of young people. Well, now getting to the news today, there is a UK study that shows that queer identity among young people is falling. Let's read it from a Daily Mail article here. Gen Z's gender craze cools as data shows non-binary identification among students declines. More coffee, please. And I quote, shocking new data shows that the number of young people identifying as non-binary has plummeted. Eric Kaufman, a politics professor based out of Vancouver, analyzed data from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression as well as universities and discovered that non-binary identification has dropped significantly amongst Gen Z since 2023. The data from FIRE, I'm assuming it's FIRE, or the acronym's FIRE, I'm going to say FIRE, which polled more than 60,000 students at colleges across the United States, shows that just 3.6% identified as a gender other than male or female. In 2024, that figure was at 5.2%, and in both 2022 and 2023, 6.8% of the college students identified themselves as non-binary, a little more than double the percentage of college students who do today. Self-reported data from elite institutions tell a similar story, Kaufman found. Andover Phillips Academy in suburban Boston, which surveys 3/4 of its students each year, for example, reported that in 2023, 9.2% identified as neither male nor female. This year, the figure is at just 3%. At Brown University, a whopping 5% of students identified as non-binary in 2022 and 2023, but by 2025, the share dropped to 2.6%. So what does this really mean? This means that the UK is saying that they're gay no more. Not really. They're actually just saying that they don't identify as non-binary as much. And so we also do see that the fad and the fashion of the LGBTQ2 plus movement is plummeting. So now they told us that this was long held beliefs and this was their convictions, and they really did believe in this, and this was rooted ideology for which they needed to fight for and defend. But what we're actually seeing, it was nothing more than a sociological fad and fashion of the day, because young people will pick up on fads and fashions, and politics and the culture and media and society was pushing this on the young people. And so they were picking it up and it became the new fad and fashion. As a matter of fact, the furry club became a new fad and fashion. They even thought it was a fad and fashion to walk around and be depressed. Why? Because America kept pushing victimhood down on people. And so they thought victimhood was actually a virtue. So they would walk around depressed and act suicidal all the time. Now, there were some that were actually depressed and suicidal, or there were some that acclimated to it until it actually became a part of who they were. But unfortunately, a lot of this was downstream from culture, politics, media, college professors, and even crazy mamas who wanted to try to change their kids at 3 years old, that was trying to figure out whether they wanted to be Batman or Robin or the cowboy or the Indian. And so what you see is that this is a fad and fashion that was pushed down on young people, because young people are still developing and they're still gullible. And that's why we don't allow the state to rule our kids. That's why we as parents are the ones that are to teach our children, not the religion of the state, which has become nothing more or less than humanism, to try to run God out, to try to run away the virtues and the family tradition, the tradition of one man and one woman coming together and building a family. They tried to run out all of these principles that's been around for a very, very long time. Even if you're not a Bible believer, you can see that most of human history is based around this idea, this concept, because you can't build civilizations without men and women coming together and repopulating the earth, which is exactly what the Bible said to do. to repopulate the earth and to have dominion over it, to rule and to reign over it. So that's good. I'm glad that there's young people coming to reality, and they're pushing past the fad and the fashions of today. And maybe some of them will be able to enjoy what I have enjoyed for the last 14 years. I got married as a young man, 24 years of age. My wife was 19 years old. And yes, there is ups and downs. Yes, there is good times and hard times. Yes, there is pain involved. Yes, there are tears involved. Yes, there are times of confusion and chaos and calamity involved, but nothing good comes easy. And one of the most beautiful things you can do is get married and raise children. And at the end of your life, when your profession is over and you're retired, you're not going to have your profession anymore. But I can tell you what you can have. You can have your family. You can have your spouse, and you can have your children, and you can have your grandkids coming around. I already know that I'm going to enjoy the grandkids because the church I pastor, all the other kids are not my kids. And so we just kind of sometimes treat them like they're our grandkids. Some of our kids have a hard time with it. They go, Dad, you don't treat us like that. I'm like, yeah, because I got to take you home with me. And so we can just kind of spoil them and send them on. We're looking forward to that stage. But we live in a society that is telling people not to have kids or to have kids real late in life. And having kids young is not for everybody. But if you really want to become a responsible person, have kids and love and care for them. And this is why we're against abortion, because abortion is murder, it's a genocide, it's a Holocaust on the unborn, but also it's selfish. And the fact that people are not having kids as often means that people are being able to live selfish lives and not having to learn the level of responsibility that comes with being a parent. It's a wonderful thing. There's nothing greater than when I come home and one of my little kids run up to the door and say, Daddy, I love you. Daddy, I'm glad to see you. Daddy, will you play cars with me? It's one of the greatest feelings. And so hopefully some young people in the UK will now come out of these fads and fashions. They'll get married, they'll have children, and they'll go on and they'll enjoy a beautiful life for years to come and have grandkids and live long, healthy lives. And their grandkids can come and they can get down and play with the car and then have the older kids help them get up because the back hurts. Now, going on inside of the world as well as phase 2 of Trump's peace deal. Now we can see that there are some issues going on right now as the Hamas is not playing along, and I warn that we will celebrate cautiously because we don't trust Hamas, because we don't trust terrorists. So for all the Cenk Uygurs and the TYT and all the crazy ones that want to side with the ones that say from the river to the sea, death to Israel and death to America, it wasn't Israel that broke the deal. It was Hamas that is the ones that's committing acts of terror. And I put out a Revealed Dispatch article today on it, and I want to read it. It's called We Cannot Trust Terrorists, the Hamas Peace Deception. And I quote, the celebration that came with caution. When news of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas broke, I supported it cautiously. I celebrated any step towards saving lives and restoring order, but I also warned you cannot trust terrorists. Sadly, that warning proved true almost instantly. Hamas has now released videos of public executions, dragging men into the streets and shooting them as traitors for allegedly collaborating with Israel. These barbaric acts were carried out while peace ink was still drying. Once again, the world's naivety between terror has been met with blood. Terrorists don't seek peace, they seek power. Terrorism thrives on chaos, not compromise. It cannot coexist with liberty, justice, or truth. It only uses them as tools to manipulate the moral weak. Every time Hamas signs a peace deal, it's not a sign of repentance. It's a strategic pause, time to reload, rearm, and reposition. Their leadership survives on fear, propaganda, and the world's short memory. So while diplomats cheer and cameras flash, Israel's soldiers and civilians know better. Evil doesn't keep treaties. Palestine must reject Hamas or be consumed by it. If the Palestinian people want a future, they must reject the men who keep them enslaved to perpetual war. Hamas does not represent freedom. It represents death. It is a part of a death cult. Its leaders are not patriots. They are tyrants dressed in religious garbs, using children as shields and civilians as propaganda. If Palestine continues under terrorist rule, it will be driven from the land entirely, not by Israel's ambition, but by its own corruption. God's justice will not allow a people led by bloodlust to prosper indefinitely. Now, to the Jehadi Candy crowd. Of course, the truth doesn't sit well with the Jehadi Candy or Candace Owens crowd. Those like Candace Owens and her echo chamber of half truths and selective outrage. In their world, Israel is always the villain, and Hamas somehow becomes the misunderstood victim. Tucker Carlson, as Mark Levin humorously nicknamed him, has joined the chorus of misguided and moral equivalents, preaching peace through appeasement while terrorists film executions. Let's be clear. Standing with Israel is not blind allegiance. It's standing with civilization over savagery. The Christian and conservative response should be this. As believers and patriots, we cannot afford moral confusion. We stand for peace, but not at the expense of truth. We pray for Palestinians, but not for the success of their oppressors. We seek justice, but we reject the false prophets of balance who excuse terror in the name of empathy. The Bible teaches they have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying, peace, peace, but there is no peace. There can be no peace with those who glorify death, and there can be no trust in those who use peace as a weapon. The final word in this revealed dispatch is this: Hamas has once again shown the world who they are. They cannot be trusted, they cannot be negotiated with, and they cannot be reasoned into morality. If Palestine desires peace, it must first turn away from its terrorists or face the judgment that always follows those who shed innocent blood. End quote. Now, there is phase 2 of Trump's peace deal in Gaza. Now, I support the president of the United States. I told you there was things I didn't fully agree with, and those things are because those things that you're not allowed to say on air, that Hamas will rise back up to power, or they will rebrand. Terrorism, jihadism will begin to rise up again, and they will go after Israel. If not now, 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later. The only thing that will keep it from rising back up, as long as Trump or J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or somebody strong on the conservative side of the aisle is taking the reins of being the leader, the commander in chief, and has a strong military and secretary of state behind him. Now, I support Trump, and I thank God for what he's doing. Now, Trump declares to Hamas that he will have them disarmed. They will either disarm by willingness or we will force them to disarm. And it's either willingly or it's to be forced. This is what he said in a live question and answer session after he gave a speech. Now, Trump is not afraid to use force. We have seen this before. He's willing to end geopolitical leaders that are terrorists, or he's willing to go after them, and he's willing to make sure that they are not going to cause harm to America, Israel, or the West. Or Trump will take his hands off and let Israel do their job. Now, if Israel wanted to lay it flat, they could. If Israel wanted to make it Gaza flat in a matter of a moment, they could. Now, Jehadi Candy is telling everybody that 85% of Gaza is completely the rubble, which is not true. It's not accurate. If that was the case, there would be more lives that would have been lost, and we would not have to take all of Hamas's numbers, I'm sure. But Jehadi Candy would like everybody to know there's nothing left of Gaza, so there's no reason for doing all of this. She's just grifting all the time. And Tucker Carlson, as Mark Levin would call him, is doing the same. But we find that Trump, he can take his hands off completely, and Israel can flatten them if they wanted to. They have the power to do that. Israel is losing innocent people because they're actually trying to work with the United States, and they're actually trying to do this in a way that they don't just have to go in there and mass genocide them, even though the radical left and Jehadi Candies and all of them will say that they are committing a genocide. No, they're trying to fight a war and win a war. Because usually in time past, to win a war, you have to go in, you have to be swift and quick, and you have to suck the life out of the air out of the room until one side goes, stop, wave the right flag, anything, just please stop. And then you come to the table and you make negotiations. However, the problem with negotiating with terrorists, they'll come back after your children or grandchildren. And the only way you stop it is you must have strong leadership, or you have to remove the terrorists altogether. And the only way that the Palestinian people could survive that is they must also turn against Hamas. What do you think America would have done if over 60 to 70% of the Germans would have been siding with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis? Do you think we would have stopped when we did? Do you think we wouldn't have kept fighting the war and fighting it aggressively? We absolutely would have. But President Trump is doing everything he can. And now he is telling Hamas, you will disarm or we will force you to be disarmed. Now, he didn't say how he would do that because President Trump doesn't reveal all of that, because it's a very smart leadership tactic not to reveal to your geopolitical threats what you're going to do and let them plan around that. He wants to be surprising to them. But there's two ways he can do it. We can help. And trust me, we have the power to do that. Or he can just simply take his hands off Israel and let them finish the job. They have the power to do it as well. And so I support the President of the United States. I am praying for him today. And this is why I don't believe in a two-state solution. I don't believe in the two-state solution for the same reason I don't believe that we should allow the radical left to have positions of power anymore. I believe we must win the political, the political, spiritual, and ideological war, because I believe that the radical left wants to rot out the system of America, Israel, and the West. And so does radical Islam. That's why humanists and Islamists get along so much together, even though they have nothing in common. And if they get their wish list, they'll turn on each other in the end. The only thing they have in common is the same enemy. They hate Israel, they hate America, and they hate the ideas of the West. They want from the river to the sea. They want to eliminate the Israelites altogether, and they want death to America. They want to erode away the American way because they think we're the great Satan, and they believe that Israel is a great Satan as well. And so if you begin to compromise with them, what happens is they're going to continually try to erode it away. They're not going to play by the same rules, just like humanists don't play with the same rules, just like the radical leftists and the Marxists that is blending in with fascism doesn't play by the same rules as we do. We want to do things properly, but they'll look for ways to manipulate and to rig the system to get whatever they want and keep coming back and keep coming back. That's why even though President Trump won, we cannot just go and take ease, because they're just rebranding. They're still trying to get into every institution there is. They're still trying to infiltrate everything from within. They're just rebranding everything, but they're still trying to push all their ideologies, which is to rot out the American way and the ideas of the West. And so this is the same way Islam handles things as well. And so when you begin to compromise with them, they'll begin to shake your hand and try to pull you off the cliff with them. It's the same way the humanists do as well. You can't compromise with radical leftists because they are not civilized. They have one mission in mind: to tear down their political opposition to whatever cost it is. However they can do it, that's what they want to do. And so we must not be naive about these things. And I believe that Trump needs to stay strong, even though I actually, I have an even stronger approach, because I believe we're going to keep seeing these headlines come up with Hamas. And so I think he needs to absolutely do a total disarmament of Hamas. Either they do it willingly or he does it by force. And look, if they want to keep fighting us and fighting Israel, they'll find out that there's probably an expiration date on all of that. So they are really taking big gambles and risks. But when you have an ideology that if you die in the name of the cause of your religion, that you're automatically going to heaven, why not? Why not? When you're radicalizing your young people to think that if they commit suicide just to kill the infidels and they can go automatically to heaven, and if they're a young men, they can get a bunch of black-eyed virgins, why not then? Why stay here where there's all these problems? Why not go on to heaven? And so you have to understand we are going up against something that is, and you got to look back in history when Barack Hussein tried to tell us that Thomas Jefferson actually was, he was kind of leaning towards Islam, and he was leaning towards the Muslim because he owned the Quran. Yeah, he wrote in his own Quran about, really, he thought it was a crazy religion. He thought they were madmen because the Navy ships in Tripoli, and part of the Navy song was because we were spending about 20 to 30% of the federal budget under President George Washington just getting our Americans back from the Islamists that were capturing them. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson went over there and they were like, man, these people are radically crazy and they don't understand human civilization. And so they were not for that. As a matter of fact, General George Washington had approached. He would love to go in and fumble all of them at the time, because you have to understand he was fighting wars and trying to protect his nation and all of that. So General George Washington, who became the first president of the United States, did not have a good outlook on them. And you can research that yourself. So I support President Trump, although I think he needs to stay muscled up on it. I'm glad he's a strong leader. I'm thankful for Marco Rubio, for J.D. Vance. And if J.D. Vance becomes the next president, or Marco Rubio, one of those two men, I think will be fine. But if a radical leftist gets back in there, Israel's going to be right back in the same problem again. They're going to have their women raped and murdered. They're going to have their children beheaded on camera. They're going to have many people that are going to die. They're going to be looking for a weak, vulnerable moment, and they will not stop until they find that weak and vulnerable moment, because the terrorists are not negotiable. You can't negotiate with terrorists. They are just trying to eliminate their enemy to whatever degree they have to try to do that. They want to eliminate their enemy because they want to take the entire land. They're not looking for a two-state solution. They're looking for the entirety, from the river to the sea. They want the entirety of it. They're not looking for a two-state solution. And for the Squad and for AOCs and I just forgot her name, the wacky one from Michigan there, the Islamist herself. They don't want a two-state solution. It's not really about Israel stopping the genocide. They're not happy until Israel ceases to exist. They don't want Israel to exist at all. And Candy Owens is the same way. She'll try to play the card that she's not, but really she is. She hates Israel. She wants regime change in Israel. She wants regime change with Bibi before she wants regime change with the Palestinian leaders, Hamas. She would rather see Bibi thrown out than the Hamas leadership thrown out. She said this on her own podcast. She's the same one that's peddling the conspiracy theories that TPUSA was turned their back on Charlie Kirk. It was an inside hit job. It was paid and bought by Israel, and that maybe, and some of the followers are even blaming that Erica Kirk might have even been involved in the assassination of her own husband, who, by the way, gave a very beautiful speech yesterday and the awarding of the Medal of Honor to Charlie Kirk from the President of the United States. And the president took time out of his extremely busy schedule. He was up for like 2 days straight, and yet he wanted to postpone it until he realized it was Charlie Kirk's 32nd birthday. And so then he said, I can't put that off. I got to show up. And so I really salute and honor the President of the United States. If it was lying Biden, he would have been laying on the beach somewhere, not even realizing where he was. Now, I know there's probably some people that want me to talk about this political piece about the Republicans, the young Republicans. I'm not going to talk about it on today's episode because I want to research things. Look, I know in all the news media, everybody wants to rush it out and be the first ones to get it out there. They want to be on the edge and be the first ones. But unfortunately, they'll put it out there not even knowing what the truth of the article is all about, not even knowing the truth. They just rush it out there because they want to be the first ones to get it out there because they believe that that's noble and that's going to attract a crowd. We would rather attract a crowd by giving you truth. And so since we don't have all the answers, haven't been able to investigate it too well, I'm not going to rush to that. So we'll probably talk about that tomorrow. That is the political piece, article about the young Republicans. And from the initial, I'll just be honest with you, I think there's probably some mischaracterization going on, allegedly. I think that the radical left is probably being dishonest in it. They're probably using a portion of truth to pack all their hidden agenda. And many on the right are weak. I call them milquetoast Republicans, and some of them are just outright reprobate Republicans. And so I believe that they're probably trying to divide the base and turn us against one another by taking a portion of truth and hiding all their hidden agenda behind it. That is my speculation, and I'll try to investigate that and give my report on it tomorrow. However, I don't want to speak about it in full today because I don't want to just rush things out without knowing the fullness of the truth on it. I think it's important that the Bible talks about there being wisdom in a man who listens to the entirety of the matter first before he speaks or before he even gives his opinion on it. Now, if you want my premature opinion or my premature speculation, allegedly, I have a feeling that there's probably a little portion of truth that the radical left is using to pack all their hidden agenda, and then they'll get their fake virtue signaling. And you have Chucky Schumer over there coming out talking about how he's outraged, while you have Jay Jones, who was giving some of the most vile, vicious, violent rhetoric, and none of them has denounced him. Because they're hypocrites, but that's besides the point. So, well, that's all we have for today on the Revealed Report. Thank you for tuning in to today's very, very special edition, because this is the 14th anniversary of my precious wife and I. And so if Audrey listens to this, I love you. And even if you don't, thank you for supporting me and everything that God is trying to call me to. Well, America, I love you. The church will be here tomorrow because Jesus said, upon this rock I have built my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We have that hope. It's an eternal hope. However, the republic hasn't been totally burnt down yet. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.